In the days when the thrones of Israel and Judah gleamed beneath the same sun yet bowed to different altars, two kings arose who shared a name and a destiny intertwined by blood. Their name was Jehoram, meaning Yahweh is exalted. But as their reigns would show, both exalted themselves above the God who gave them power. In Samaria, Jehoram, the son of Ahab, inherited a kingdom founded in rebellion. His father had built altars to Baal. His mother Jezebel had filled the land with prophets of deceit, and the blood of Naboth still cried out from the fields. The northern throne trembled with the weight of its sins. Yet Jehoram sought a softer idolatry. He removed the image of Baal his father had made. But the golden calves of Jeroboam still stood gleaming in Bethel and Dan, symbols of a nation that had forgotten its covenant. 2 Kings 3:1-3. Far to the south, the throne of Judah stood in Jerusalem, still bearing the promise of David, still called by the name of the Lord. Upon it sat Jehoram, son of the righteous king Jehoshaphat. But the peace his father sought through alliance with Israel became the snare of his house. For Jehoshaphat had bound Judah to Ahab's line through marriage, and from that union came Athaliah, the daughter of Jezebel, whom Jehoram took as his wife. Through her influence, the worship of Baal crept into the holy city, and Judah's throne, once pure, began to mirror the corruption of the north. 2 Chronicles 21:5-6. Thus two kings, bound by marriage, by blood, and by name, sat on opposite thrones but shared the same heart. The name Jehoram echoed in both capitals, yet neither bore its meaning in truth. Their kingdoms were mirrors facing one another, reflecting the same pride, the same defiance, and the same doom. In time, the two joined forces against Moab. The alliance of Israel, Judah, and Edom marched into the desert, only to be trapped by thirst and despair. Then came Elisha, the prophet who bore Elijah's mantle, declaring the word of the Lord. Without rain, the valley filled with water. Without merit, the armies were saved. God showed mercy, not for the king's sake, but for the sake of his covenant. 2 Kings 3:6-20. Yet divine patience has limits. Both thrones stood under the shadow of prophecy, and judgment was written long before their fall. In the north, Jehoram's end came by the arrow of Jehu, the anointed avenger who struck him down in Naboth's vineyard, fulfilling Elijah's ancient curse. In the south, Jehoram of Judah wasted away by disease, his bowels consumed from within until his body could no longer hold life. He died unmourned, and no one regretted his passing. 2 Kings 9:24, 2 Chronicles 21:18-20. The two kings named Jehoram were not merely rulers who shared a name. They were signs of a greater pattern. The divided kingdom, once united under David, now reflected the divided heart of its people. What happened in Israel bled into Judah. What began in idolatry ended in ruin. The same name that meant Yahweh is exalted became a tragic irony, for both thrones fell by the weight of their pride. Their stories are the twin echoes of a warning that no alliance, no heritage, and no royal title can shield a nation from the consequences of turning away from the God who made it. And thus begins the story of two kings named Jehoram, two thrones, one lineage, and a shared downfall that shook the kingdoms of Israel and Judah alike. In the era of divided kingdoms, when Israel's northern crown glittered in Samaria and Judah's royal house still stood firm in Jerusalem, two kings rose bearing the same name, Jehoram. The name meant Yahweh is exalted, a declaration of divine majesty. Yet in the lives of these two rulers it would become a tragic contradiction, for though their names honored the Lord, their reigns would draw both kingdoms into the shadow of his wrath. Jehoram, son of Ahab, took the throne of Israel after his brother Ahaziah died without a son. The court of Samaria was steeped in the memory of Ahab and Jezebel, whose reign had filled the land with altars to Baal and silenced the prophets of God. When Jehoram ascended, he sought to distance himself from his father's worst excesses. He removed the pillar of Baal from Samaria, but did not tear down the shrines of Jeroboam at Bethel and Dan. The northern kingdom remained chained to its counterfeit worship. At the same time in Judah, another Jehoram began to reign. the son of Jehoshaphat, a king known for wisdom, alliances, and faith. But Jehoshaphat's devotion to peace had forged a dangerous bond. He had allied himself with Ahab's house, sealing it through marriage. His son had taken Athaliah, Ahab's daughter, as queen, and through her influence, the corruption of Jezebel crept silently into the courts of Jerusalem. When Jehoshaphat died, his son's first act was not of thanksgiving, but of violence. Jehoram of Judah ordered the execution of all his brothers and several princes who might threaten his power. The city of David ran with blood from its own royal line. From that moment, Judah began to lose the favor that had protected it for generations. The two Jehorams reigned almost in unison, one from Samaria, one from Jerusalem, their kingdoms divided by politics, but united in decline. Both bore the legacy of kings who had known God's truth, yet drifted from his covenant. Their thrones mirrored each other, their choices echoing across the years. When Moab rebelled against Israel, refusing to pay tribute after Ahab's death, Jehoram of Israel gathered his armies. He called upon his southern neighbor for help, and Jehoram of Judah, seeking alliance and honor, agreed. Along with the king of Edom, they set out through the wilderness to subdue Moab. But as their forces marched for 7 days, the land gave no water, and the armies began to despair. It was Jehoram of Israel who cried first, believing they had been doomed by divine will. Yet Jehoram of Judah remembered the prophets of old and sought counsel from one who spoke for the Lord. The prophet Elisha was brought before them. He looked upon Jehoram of Israel with scorn, reminding him that his father and mother had sought false gods. Only for the sake of Jehoshaphat's lineage would he listen. Elisha called for music, and as the melody filled the air, he declared that the valley would fill with water, though no wind or rain would come. In the dawn that followed, crimson sunlight reflected off pools of water, and the Moabites, mistaking it for the blood of their enemies, rushed into battle unprepared. Israel's forces struck them down and pursued them deep into their land, but the victory turned bitter. When the Moabite king realized defeat was certain, he offered his firstborn son as a burnt offering upon the wall. The armies of Israel recoiled in horror and withdrew. The triumph dissolved into silence, and the campaign ended in sorrow. Reference, 2 Kings 3:1-27. From that day, Jehoram of Israel's confidence faltered. Though he had seen the power of the Lord through Elisha's word, his heart did not turn. He remained caught between faith and pride, trusting neither the idols nor the God of his fathers. Far to the south, Jehoram of Judah walked a similar path. He fortified the city and ruled with a heavy hand, but unrest grew. The Philistines and Arabians began to raid the borders, and revolt stirred within Edom. The stability his father had left him began to crumble. The prophets of Judah warned him that he had abandoned the covenant. Still, he hardened his heart, influenced by Athaliah and the memory of her mother Jezebel's dominion. In both realms the heavens grew silent, and the favor that once crowned the house of David and the house of Israel began to fade. Years passed and famine swept through the north. In Samaria, Jehoram of Israel found himself surrounded by Aramean armies. The siege was so severe that food vanished from the markets, and desperation turned to horror. It was said that a donkey's head sold for silver, and that mothers argued over whose child would be eaten next. Within the palace walls, the king tore his robes in anguish and cried out that he would have Elisha as head for this calamity. But Elisha, steadfast, prophesied that by the next day, flour and barley would be sold at normal prices. The people laughed, but the prophecy was fulfilled when the Arameans fled their camp, leaving behind food, silver, and gold. The city was saved, yet the king's heart remained unchanged. Reference 2 Kings 6:24-7:20. While Jehoram of Israel wrestled with famine and fear, Jehoram of Judah faced judgment of another kind. One day, a letter arrived in Jerusalem, a message carried from the prophet Elijah, long thought taken up into heaven. Its words were as sharp as the sword that Jehoram had used against his brothers. The prophet declared that because he had led Judah into idolatry and slain the princes of the house of David, the Lord would strike him with a plague, and his people, his wives, and his children would be taken. The prophecy came to pass. Raiders from the Philistines and Arabians stormed Jerusalem, plundering treasures and carrying off his family. Only the youngest son, Ahaziah, was left. Then Jehoram himself was struck by disease, a painful affliction of the bowels that lasted for years until his death. When he died, no one mourned. He was buried, but not among the kings. Reference, 2 Chronicles 21:12-20. North of Judah, Elisha's prophecies continued to echo through the corridors of power. Jehoram of Israel turned often to the prophet in moments of crisis, but never yielded in repentance. Time after time, he witnessed miracles: the healing of Naaman the Syrian, the blinding of Aramean soldiers, the restoration of life. Yet his throne stood divided between fear of God and loyalty to his father as idols. Meanwhile, in Judah, the legacy of Jehoram's sin lived on through his wife Athaliah. The daughter of Ahab and Jezebel had brought to Jerusalem the customs and cruelty of her mother's court. Through her, the blood of the northern house had mixed with that of David, and the corruption of Jezebel's line had entered the royal seat of Judah itself. Both kingdoms now stood poised upon a precipice. In Israel, the dynasty of Ahab was nearing its end. In Judah, the house of David had been wounded by its own hand. And in heaven, the decree had gone forth that both Jehorams, and all they represented, would soon fall. The tide began to shift in the north. Elisha sent one of his disciples to anoint Jehu, a commander of Israel's army, as king. The command was clear: strike down the house of Ahab and cleanse the land of Jezebel's blood. When Jehu was anointed, the army proclaimed him king, and he drove his chariot furiously toward Jezreel, where Jehoram of Israel lay recovering from wounds sustained in battle against the Arameans. Jehoram of Israel rode out to meet him. On the fields of Naboth, the same vineyard seized by Ahab and cursed by Elijah, the two men faced one another. When Jehoram saw Jehu approaching, he called out, "Is it peace, Jehu?" And Jehu answered, "What peace, so long as the harlotries of your mother Jezebel and her witchcraft are so many?" Realizing betrayal, Jehoram turned to flee. But Jehu drew his bow and struck him between the shoulders. The arrow pierced his heart, and Jehoram fell dead in his chariot. His body was thrown into the field of Naboth, fulfilling the prophecy spoken years before against his father's house. Reference, 2 Kings 9:14-26. Thus the line of Ahab ended, and with it, the reign of Jehoram of Israel. His death was both judgment and deliverance, the breaking of a curse that had lingered for generations. Yet his end did not bring peace. Jehu's zeal would spill further blood, and the northern kingdom would soon slide toward chaos. In Judah, news of Jehoram's death in Israel rippled through the court of Jerusalem. Athaliah, his sister, and queen of Judah, saw the tides of fate turning. Her husband, Jehoram of Judah, was already dead from his disease, and her son Ahaziah had taken the throne. But when Jehu's rebellion spread, Ahaziah too was caught and slain. In a single stroke, both Jehorams, one of Israel, one of Judah, and their offspring were gone. Athaliah seized the throne of Judah, killing all royal heirs she could find. For 6 years, she ruled in blood, until the surviving child of David's line, Joash, was hidden away in the temple by the priest Jehoiada. The curses that began with Jehoram's choices had consumed his house and nearly extinguished the promise given to David. The chronicles of both kingdoms would record these years with sorrow. In Israel, Jehu's bloodshed brought no lasting peace. The northern kingdom weakened under successive rulers, drifting further from the covenant. In Judah, Athaliah's reign became a dark echo of Jezebel's, an unholy reign that desecrated the temple and replaced the worship of God with Baal. When Joash was finally revealed and crowned, Athaliah was executed and the covenant renewed. But even then, the memory of Jehoram's reign lingered, a reminder that when kings sought power through compromise, judgment always followed. Both Jehorams had ruled during a pivotal age, one in the north, one in the south, yet their choices intertwined like threads of the same tragedy. Their reigns revealed a truth that echoed through Israel as prophets, that God's patience was long but not endless, and that corruption, even in royal houses, would meet its end. References: 2 Kings 11, 2 Chronicles 22-23. As the years turned to decades, the stories of both Jehorams faded into the scrolls of history. Few spoke their names, and fewer still remembered their deeds. Yet the legacy of their reigns endured, not in monuments or victories, but in warnings. Their lives stood as mirrors of each other, both sons of powerful fathers, both heirs to thrones of promise, both men who began with strength and ended in ruin. One died pierced by an arrow on the cursed soil of Naboth's vineyard. The other died in agony, unmourned and unburied among his fathers. Between them lay the testimony of prophets, the mercy of God spurned, and the cost of idolatry repeated in 2 kingdoms. The same name, Jehoram, became a symbol of lost honor, a reminder that titles cannot sanctify rebellion, and that divine judgment respects neither name nor throne. Centuries later, when the chroniclers of Israel and Judah compiled their records, they wrote with precision to distinguish the two men. Yet the moral of their story was singular, that when a king exalts himself instead of Yahweh, the name Jehoram becomes an irony carved into stone. In the silence of history, the twin thrones of Jehoram stand as one lesson, that the strength of a nation lies not in the might of its armies, nor the brilliance of its alliances, but in the humility of its kings before God. And thus ends the tale of 2 kings named Jehoram, 2 rulers bound by name, mirrored in sin, and remembered as warnings in the chronicles of the Bible. In the dust of forgotten palaces, where the wind still whispers through the ruins of Samaria and Jerusalem, the echo of their story remains. 2 kings bore one name, and through them, 2 nations bore one lesson, that power without righteousness leads only to decay. Their thrones are long gone, their crowns turned to dust, yet their memory endures as a warning carved into history, that no kingdom, however strong, can stand when its king exalts himself above God.